So we're doing our first live stream here on Keep Cardiff Live. At least I hope that's the case. I'm watching for Tony Chapman's eyebrows to get the eyebrows of Joe. There they are. There they are. We're all good. Jonny Owen, lovely to see you, because I haven't seen you for a long, long time. But we've known each other a bit over the years. Great, as I just said before we started. Great to see you doing so well. Really pleased for you.
Thanks, Dave.
Can we firstly talk about the Three Kings to start off, and then I'm gonna jump back in time in a bit. But tell me a little about the idea behind the Three Kings, and the concept and how it's all come about.
Yeah, what happened was I'd done two football films. I'd done a film about Nottingham Forest called I Believe in Miracles, and a film about Wales's journey to the Euros, Don't Take Me Home. And the company that had made the films, Senna and Amy, the producer there, sorry, James Gay-Rees, he got in touch with me, said he liked what I'd done and would I be interested in working on something with them. Mm-hmm. Did I have any ideas? My father passed away in 2017. My dad had worked underground and in the steelworks, as most of my classmates' fathers did. It was just the way of the world. And he always used to have this habit of pointing out to people who worked underground as well. So if Shankly came on TV or Jock Stein, he'd say, they were miners. And I reminded him of this just before he passed away, bless him. He'd been ill. And he kind of laughed and said, well, you've remembered. And I was like, yes. And I had a chat to James about this. And I said, it always fascinated me that those three managers were born very close to each other. They were lifelong friends and they came from the same part of the world, the same industry. And I just think it's a story that might be worth telling, for a modern audience. And he agreed. And then we decided to make the film. That was about 2.5 years ago. We didn't realize what a Herculean task it would be, Steve, because there's a big story, those three men, where they come from, what they achieved, but we got there in the end. And it's ready for release now these next few weeks.
Yeah, I'm sorry about your dad, by the way.
Oh, that's all right. Yeah, he was fine. He was a good age. He was very sort of very philosophical about it in the end. You know what I mean? He was sort of, he kept saying, I've had a good innings and I'm all right. You know what I mean? So with that sort of spirit, I sort of make the film.
I mean, I'm considerably older. My dad passed away a few years ago, and he would have had a similar attitude.
Yeah,
I know.
Yeah,
and also would have been a big football fan, so he probably would have really loved this. Because of course, for people of a certain age, these people, Shankly, Busby, and Steen, I mean, they're just colossal figures, aren't they? The personalities. If we just briefly talk about Bill Shankly, I met Bill Shankly once at Ninian. I was a friend of mine got me a free ticket for the game because his dad was a football ref. So I'm sitting a few seats ahead of him, and it was the one which is, I think, before your time, probably, when John Toshak got a hat trick against Scotland and we won 3-0.
I was at that game, yeah.
Oh, there you go, brilliant. Yeah. Great. Yeah. So I'm in the director's box, which I've never been before, just because I had a free ticket, and just a few seats behind me is Bill Shankly, and in my drawer somewhere in the house, on the back of a fag packet, I got a very grumpy Bill Shankly signed by. There you go, son. There you go, son.
Yeah.
He's off.
Yeah.
He was gone, but I mean, I know this stuff will come up in the movie, but I always loved that quote of, football's more important than life and death. It's way more serious.
Yeah, it's amazing. It was really good expression. They were giants. That's exactly the expression I would use as well. And that's why I've tried to tell them the story for a new generation, is how big they were. They were colossuses, across everything. They seem to come up, talking about great subjects of the day. I think Shankly was the first person to interview Harold Wilson, just after he finished as Prime Minister. Those are the kind of things they were doing, which sounds, it's almost like Mourinho interviewing, I don't know, David Cameron now. It's like you just couldn't imagine it, Yeah. But that's what they were like. They kind of dominated our lives, really. There were only 3 channels then, and they were on them quite a lot. And so, you'd get huge viewing figures. So we knew them so well, as you said, and then you'd see them in Ninian Park, and the first thing you do is you want their autograph. Do you know what I mean? That's what you do. But it was the effect they had on our lives as well. They created these huge football clubs, and changed football as we know it, really.
Yeah, I mean, Bill Shankly, people. I mean, I'm sure people of a certain age are more likely to forget this, but when he came to Liverpool, they were no great shakes, were they?
Absolutely right. They were mid-table, provincial, second division team, kind of going nowhere, really. And I've seen a part of the story which was amazing. I didn't know stuff like this, was that the person that recommended him for the job was Matt Busby. Matt Busby had played for Liverpool. He'd been captain, and the board of Liverpool, Matt Busby at this point was the most famous manager arguably in the world. You know, he'd had the babes and he'd survived the Munich air crash. He advised Liverpool to go to Huddersfield and to get his mate, Bill Shankly. And there's a really funny story. He turns to his assistant, Jimmy Murphy, a Ron the Valley boy, his famous assistant, puts the phone down and says, I might regret that because we've got Bill on us now, you know, as a rival, which is an amazing indication of the men, you know. That
wow.
You'd think somebody with a more Machiavellian sort of mentality would think, well, I don't want Bill Shankly to be manager of a club with a potential at Liverpool, but he didn't. He recommended him for the job, knowing that he'd probably become a rival. I think that's extraordinary, really, and sums the men up in some ways.
Such different times, you know, when you think about football managers these days. I mean, you took a couple of names in just now. We just live in a different world, and apart from anything else, a lot of that has changed by money. Obviously, the money these days is kind of frightening. You know, the managers are on ridiculous money as well. You've got Busby and Steen, as I say, Busby with Busby's babes and a legendary figure, and then Jock Steen was pretty scary guy. I was actually Jock Steen. Yeah, any three of those, if you were a footballer, you had a bad game, you wouldn't want to go in the dressing room afterwards, would you?
No, they were tough men. They had to be tough men because of the world they come from, as you explained earlier on, a gruff Bill Shankly sort of. And I got that quite a lot in the sort of research on the film. I think the most kindly uncle type of the three was Busby, you know, with his pipe. But he had a sort of a line of steel through him as well. He could be tough man, you know, and they all had to be, because to survive where they come from and to do what they did. But Steen in particular was a funny story of Jimmy Johnson having a bad game, and he kicks aside the dugout, and Steen chases after him, and Johnson managed to make it inside into a toilet and locks himself in. Steen says, "Come out. I'm only going to talk to you." To which Jimmy Johnson famously replied, "No, I'm not coming out because you'll hit me." And it's full of stories like that, you know, and I just love them. And Archie Macpherson, the great Scottish presenter that we remember from the 70s and 80s, said a wonderful thing to me. He said, I've spoken to incredible philosophers about football, people who can talk about the game beautifully and in a brilliant way, but when they walk in a room, they can't make anybody stand up. They can't make footballers literally stand up. He said Steen, Shankly and Busby had that. Just by walking into a room, footballers would stand up. And, I think you're right what you're saying, Steve. It's the presence they have, you know. It's this sort of the personality, the character that makes them slightly different. I don't know what that is, you know, and if you're born with it or what. But they were definitely they were people that could inspire people more than just with words.
I think Jock Steen died in 1985. I think I'm right.
He died at Nottingham Park.
Nottingham Park,
he died. The reason I remember that is I was in hospital the same time that he was brought in.
Really?
I just been smashed up by a motorbike in France, sort of thing. But I was in there, and Jock Steen, same night.
Brought in. Oh wow! I was there the night. It was a full house. Obviously, it was the World Cup qualifier, and we had to win to qualify. And Scotland sort of done us again. But I know, But I remember leaving the ground. I was with my father and my grandfather, and word spread, because in those days it was all transistor radios, wasn't it? You know, so it wasn't the internet. But word did spread around football grounds, you know, other results and things like that. And word spread around that Steen was ill, and then that he'd passed away. The word ran around quite quickly, and I just remember the silence coming out in Nottingham Park, and then, you know, you park the old car park opposite. I could just remember the silence, not just from the Scottish fans, the Welsh fans as well, because Steen had connections with Wales. He'd worked played football in Llanelli, and he was a minor. You know, you could kind of feel it in amongst both clubs that a giant had sort of passed that night. You know, somebody really important to everybody. And like you said, he infamously died in Cardiff, and his assistant that night was Sir Alex Ferguson.
Wow. I'm glad you mentioned Alex Ferguson, because I wonder what Alex Ferguson thinks about this. You know, I mean, I know it's geographically kind of based, but he's thinking, hang on, there's no bigger king than me. You know, I was the boy. Where am I? You know?
I do think he's the son of the three of them, really. They kind of almost amalgamated the three in a way, and achieved, arguably in some respects, even more than the three of them did, you know, in the sense of what he won and what he achieved. But he was a huge he was hugely influenced by the three of them. He was obviously Steen's assistant at Scotland. He knew Busby because Busby was alive for the first 7-8 years of his tenure at Manchester United, and he'd met Bill Shankly many times. I think Aberdeen had played Liverpool in the European Cup in the early 80s. So he was obviously very aware of that he was carrying on their legacy, and we've got him speaking in the film quite a few times, and he speaks brilliantly about the three of them. And I do believe he's the last great Scottish football manager, because we grew up with the cliche, well, I say cliche because it's true, that the great managers tended to be Scottish. And I think he's the last probably of that line of great managers that came from North Dakota.
We have to therefore, just before I'm going to pass you to Tony in a second, so he wants to talk to you about, because he did some research last night. He watched Svengali again, right? So he wants to talk to you about that. But before I do, talking about Svengali, in fact, I'm going to say I'm going to say 3 words. Svengali, Jimmy Schooler. Over to you, Tom. There's a Scottish manager for you.
Oh, Cardiff City, yeah.
No, I did watch it last night. I wasn't forced to watch it. It wasn't like homework. That's Steve. Steve made that. Yeah, it's like, do your homework. No, I've seen it before, but I just wanted to refresh my mind about it. And one of the things that really interested me about it, I mean, it's a great cast as well. It's brilliant. You know, I really enjoyed it. But one of the things that interested me is obviously you wrote it and you produced it as well. So it must have been like a bit of a passion of yours anyway, you know, it was your sort of baby. I mean, how do you go about getting these sort of things off the ground? It must be a tremendous amount of effort to, you know, from the actual story to getting it filmed, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it began as an online series really on YouTube. This is back in the late noughties, as they call it now. So this is when YouTube, even the technology wasn't the same. I don't even think Twitter existed when I first started it, or it might have just started, but it was started as an online thing, and the idea was to do little virals where I played this lad from Wales who wanted to manage a band. And I met Alan McGee quite early on, really, when I moved to London, and he agreed to sort of be in this viral, and then it kind of became a very cult thing amongst the music industry. It got shared a lot amongst that world, you know, and that world was very different then. It was just sort of, they were just having to cope with the arrival of the internet. Yeah, and I was just a bit like, it got interest by some big production companies, and then in the end, Universal Films seen it, the UK arm, and liked it, and they sort of agreed to sort of help fund it and develop it. But I look back, and it's quite interesting what you say. There was a lot of work, and I was a lot younger then, and I do wonder the energy I had for the time doing it, only because of simple things like, I never even realised till I made the film, when I was making the virus, it's actually illegal to film in the streets of London. You've got to have a permit.
Yeah.
So you've got to go to the council. I never knew any of this. I was just taking the camera and just filming, you know. So it was a slight naivety amongst it, you know, the start of it. But I liked the fact that, you know, we were quite brave. Me and my mate Roger Evans, who plays Horsey, was in it from the very beginning. It was kind of our kind of idea, really. And I was just a bit like, looking back, I think the recklessness of youth really helped it in the early days. But I'm glad I did it now.
Yeah, brilliant. I mean, your character, you come over as a little bit naive, and it's really nice, you know. And I think, I mean, Steve and myself have been involved in local music for years and years, and I could see that, you know, that you go into it thinking, oh, wouldn't it be great to put a gig on? Wouldn't it be great to do this? But the actual reality of it is a bit different, isn't it? You know.
Massively, yeah.
Yeah, there was a couple of little in jokes there as well. I noticed in the van when you're talking to your partner Vicky about Notts County, where you said, "What do you know about football? You're a Notts County fan."
I know, yeah.
You know,
I know.
It's only football fans understand that sort of thing. It's just banter, isn't it? There's nothing.
Yeah.
You know, it's just a bit of fun.
No, I don't know. I haven't had one other person in Nottingham come on to me in a bar and go, "What did he mean by that?" It was tongue in cheek, you know. But you kind of remember, oh yeah. I was like, it was just an off the cuff remark because she's a Notts County fan. Sure. And it's really interesting because when I was doing the film, obviously I was pulling on a lot of the experiences I had in the music industry, and we'll talk to Steve about stuff like this because he was a huge supporter of the bands that were coming through. He was brilliant, you know, putting bands on and all the rest of it. But the whole point of the film was, and I was very much part of this, and it was kind of based on me, is bands are bastards, you know. They all think they need to be treated a certain way. It doesn't matter what stage you're at, you know. And I was this is part of the comedy, you know. And I had this manager of our band, Paul Dixon, who's based on Dixie. And I'm looking back, and you know, the way you have to be sort of not just somebody who looks after a band, you know, financially and getting them gigs, but you know, psychologically you have to be there, sort of like, you know, the therapist as well. And I just remembered things like in those days going, well, you know, how come we're not on the cover of the Enemy, you know? And he'd be like, well, you know, because they really like you, but they're waiting for the next demo, you know, because they like this one so much, they're going to wait for the next one. He'd be like, oh, okay. And it's just all that sort of like the way you have to be with bands, you know. I just thought there was so much comedy in that world, you know, because ultimately I've always thought if Pete Doherty falls over in a bar drunk, he's a poet, you know. But if you're an electrician and you fall over in a bar drunk, you get thrown out because you're drunk and you're a nuisance. And I just thought, there's so much comedy in what you're allowed to get away with when you're in a band, and especially if you start becoming a successful band, that and that was the basis of the film, really.
Yeah, it's like the license to behave badly, isn't it? If you're in a band, it definitely. It's funny because we were just talking about this before we came on air. It's what you just said about bands. They can be, pretty tough to negotiate with, can't they? Because of just the way they are. I mean, we organise some gigs and stuff, and it's exactly what you say. You got to think of the egos. You got to think of some people act in a different way. So it's not just a fact of putting a gig on. You've just really got to sort of mollycoddle them. I suppose in a way, what you could say is like the football managers do with the footballers as well.
Yeah.
It's that kind of thing. Some need an arm around the neck, and some need to be told off, and things like that.
It's such a thankless task, I think, helping bands, whether you're managing, promoting, or you're DJ, whatever. They never say thank you. They never go, oh, I realise you've just done loads of work on this, and especially back in the day, you've been, trying to get sort of information out there and putting up photocopies of posters, and you've worked really hard. They turn up, and if it's like only half full, they're like, oh, well, this is disappointing. You realise when you're the other side of things, how hard people work, and that was what I try to do the manager's sort of perspective of it all, really, how difficult it is,
You got it across. I mean, how many Tesco's carrier bags did you get through?
Do you know what? I was asked that. Being asked that. I got through about. I think they said it was about 17 by the end over the 6 weeks filming, which is mad. And I always carried inside there the same things, which was an NME then, it was a physical NME, is Walkman as it was, some tapes, and a few other sort of like rolled up photocopies of the band. But I always had the same thing inside the bag, even after.
Brilliant. That's great.
I was just checking on my phone, by the way, just checking the live stream while we're going out. This is kind of the world we're living in at the moment, isn't it? But I haven't seen Svengali yet. I'll probably watch it tonight. Tonight I'll have a few beers or whatever, and I'll watch it, because now I know. I didn't know. I only knew. I've heard of the film. That was all. But it makes so much sense on so many different levels. Obviously, I totally connect with all of that. I mean, we're talking because I'm working at university. We're talking to young people there, and they, it's live stream, like we're doing a live stream now, and it's all kind of virtual this and virtual that. In those days, I mean, I'm sure you guys were out and about, going to the local lampposts and sticking up your posters and all the rest of it.
Literally doing that for your nights, looking back, what you did was fantastic, going out of your way to sort of put on new bands and put on great new bands as well, and South Wales we were very lucky. There was a time,
it was good, wasn't it?
Early 90s to mid 90s was an amazing period of producing so many bands that were having like major international, success, and coming from being, just bands playing the local circuit, But it was a great time. I look back very fondly on it. And I learned loads. Not just about the music, but about myself and how you behave when you're younger. And you look back and you go like, wow, I wasn't that really good. I just very funny. I've become really good mates with Kelly Jones, really, as we've got older, and he lives in London. He's done really well for himself. But he looks back on those days really fondly as well. We still talk about a gig we played at the Coliseum in Aberdeen together, and things like that. Bizarre sort of like nights that we played in Club Ivo Bach and things like that, on nights you put on. It's funny that, where you end up making films, traveling the world, I still think it's the journey that's the most interesting thing. And always the most interesting and the story you all talk about amongst your mates is always the early days where you're sort of like sleeping in the back of a van and sort of roughing it to try and get it. That's always the most interesting part of the story for me.
Well, for a couple of things which resonate with me there. Firstly, for Tony, will probably relate to this a bit more than you, Johnny, but you might as well. Sensational Alex Harvey Band. So Chris Glenn from what I would call Saab is 70 today, right?
Wow.
So which is just kind of unbelievable. But what he said was, I read an interview with him, and he said, "All I remember those days, we're in the back of the van, we're playing a gig. We're in the back of a van, we're playing a gig." It's just that, isn't it?
It's true. It's true. And your diet's terrible looking back. You're living on, pasties and chocolate and pop, basically. That's what you live on. Everybody's smoking them days, and you're just kind of like, it was almost like sort of an apprenticeship, really. But brilliant. Once you've been in a band with a few, lads or girls, and it's years later, you all talk very fondly about those early days, because it does engineer an amazing spirit of core. Everybody gets on very well. There's not many things like the music industry for generating that, where you look back at such fondness. I think it's because you're all young and trying something that you know is a little bit outside the rules, you know, a little bit sort of rock and roll, to use the expression, you know. So there's something very sexy still about, you know, being in a band, you know, with your mates and your parents inevitably going, well, don't forget the day job and make sure you get your qualifications. You know what I mean?
Well, they're mostly right, though, aren't they? You know,
they are. That's the thing as well. They look back and you go, they were right, actually. But they can't tell you when you're 18, you know, and you learn to play the guitar. It's impossible. But I think that's part of human nature, really.
A couple of things. Firstly, happy birthday to Chris Glenn, of course, and also I'm glad you keep in touch with Kelly, because I met him quite a lot over the years. I haven't seen him for years, and it's nice to you socialize with him. Is he okay?
Yeah, he's good as gold. We kind of meet for whenever he comes to Nottingham. Obviously, I go to see him. We have a pint when I'm down in London. You know, we have a beer together. Do you know Kelly's really interesting? Obviously, he's had a fantastic voice. I mean, I remember when he came out, you know, when they were kind of like, we used to laugh. He was kind of like our rivals. He was from Aberdeen, from Merthyr.
Oh yeah.
And we were a decent tight little band, you know, really mid-60s beat bands and all that. And then he comes out, and I go to see, and he sounds like a young Rod Stewart, and I'm thinking, oh, how the hell are we going to compete with that? Do you know what I mean? I remember thinking that, you know, it's like seeing a great footballer or a rugby player move, and you think, oh. And you know, they did so well. And the thing with Kelly was, and I think he went on a little bit of a tour, like a one-man tour. He's a great storyteller. He's a bit of a raconteur, really. You know, he's got great timing. He's a funny lad. And, you know, people are discovering that about him now, because he was always seen as quite serious, even almost a little bit early, really, you know. But no, actually, when you get him, he's got a great sense of humour. And I believe just before the lockdown, he went out on a sort of a one-man tour with his guitar, telling stories in between songs and all that. And he was fantastic, and he went down really well. So I'm glad people are seeing that other side to him as well.
Yeah, because I mean, I knew them like before they were signed, as you know, in those days, all the way up, you know. And I always thought that with the band. I always thought, you know, in real life, the three of them were lovely, you know, and really good fun. But then Kelly he barely said a word between the songs, you know. Just
no,
bang, bang, bang. And I kind of wished, you know, say something, you know, show your personality a bit, you know. So that's great.
Quite serious, really, because and then, you know, I used to say to him, you know, you need to tell these stories. You're funny, because, you know, if you say to Kelly, like, Tom Jones, he's got a story about going out with Tom Jones, you know, and it's hilarious, you know, because he's with Tom Jones, and he's full of these, you know. And you go, well, you need to start telling people about these, because you were at the centre of that whole cool Cymru Welsh culture thing of the late 90s into the noughties. You were you know, right in the middle of that. In fact, more so probably than anybody else, in the sense of, and the Manics were amazing, and you know, were a big band, and you had the Super Furians, but brilliant. But what was interesting with the Stereophonics was, if you went to a rugby or a football match, they would sing stereophonic songs. You know, there was the bit where he sings. They kind of almost were the essence of it all, really, I felt, in a way. And you know, bless them for it. You know, they were all brilliant at making people in London, especially, look at Wales and go, oh, something's happening down there. And I think that was only a good thing, really.
So there's a couple of things again from that, because it's great to talk to you. So many different ideas in my head. I'm thinking about, of course, Stuart ended up, you know, being on the radio. Karis is an award-winning radio presenter.
Absolutely,
on your way to becoming an award-winning. You may already have awards as a radio presenter. I don't know, but I'm sure they're on the way. And I'm still back. I'm in Pontyclun. You know, I just popped down the chip shop now and again. You know, what's gone wrong? You know,
Pontyclun's all right. I retired to Pontyclun because the Miskin Arms is a great place to drink. Is the Ivor still there?
The Ivor is still there. Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, the Ivor's okay. It's more of a restauranty place now, I think.
Oh, is it? It was always a good place. I know the Miskin's really nice. I know a lot of the Wales.
Too pricey for me, Johnny. I can't afford the Miskin.
Yeah, I've heard it's gone a bit more like sort of that way. But
it's going for that affluent thing.
Nice part of the world, Pontyclun. Do you know what I mean? I always said that.
Yeah, I'm happy. I like it here. We want to talk about other stuff, but firstly, thank you for saying that about the Red Dragon days, because I honestly, and I don't mean this in a funny way, I didn't even know if you'd even remember, so that's nice.
Oh, absolutely. Nice, it was huge. It was huge, and do you know what was great was, and I love the fact we can tell you this stuff now, how desperate you'd be to get on those bills. So we'd start off, you know, and you'd have to do a little bit of an apprenticeship. You'd have to become known, and 6 months later you'd have to have stuff, and then when you first said, yeah, we'll have you on a bill, it was like a celebration amongst us. You know, Steve Johnson. Honestly, it was a big thing, you know, because what you were able to do as well, which was brilliant, you could get A&R men there from
Yeah.
London, which was
Yeah.
so difficult in South Wales in those days, practically impossible. So for you to be able to get them down, you know, pluggers and A&R men and just people from the industry really was a massive thing, because it just gives you the opportunity then to play to people that could take you on to the next level. So God bless you for it, Steve.
Oh, thank you, and thanks very much. It is really lovely to hear that, and I was really pleased to get them over the bridge. You know,
Yeah.
just again to come to Cardiff and Wales. You know, I was really pleased. We were talking earlier, Tony and I. The thing we were surprised about was how you never ended up. I just happened to have one to my side. I haven't planned this, but this is an album series called "Take You to the Bridge."
Yes.
Okay, so there were 3 of these, which me and Tony were the guys behind. It's a series of 3 albums, and Pocket Devils were never on one of the albums. Well, why was that? Can you remember?
Oh no, what years were they? Must we just miss it by splitting up or something?
I think it might have been that. When was the
Yeah, I
first
think
year,
it
Tom?
was.
I think it was because we were the biggest problem with the Pocket Devils was we were just a bit too temperamental. If we'd stuck at it, because we had the NXS support and we were playing the all nights and we had the deal then with Sanctuary Warren, we had a good deal, but we were just a bit too. I think me personally, we were just a bit too impatient. And then when the Stereophonics got the big deal with V2 and took off, I was a bit like, oh God, you know, this is going to be really hard. And then I was really lucky that I got offered work on an ITV Wales soap called Nuts and Bolts, and it was 9 months work with good money, and I took that route. You know, I thought I'm going to go down here, and that was it. So you look back and you just think to yourself, because there's so many bands now who have become what they call it's a term they use called heritage bands. So I know the manager of Placebo really well, and he always says to me, we just didn't split up. And he said it's been so handy because now the festivals look at their tiers of bands and they go, oh, we'll have Placebo, and he said so many bands you think just fell by the wayside. And I think that was a little bit, you know, our fault really. We were just a bit too temperamental and you know, split up too many times really.
Of course, the Merthyr influence on the Pocket Devils, I suppose. You know, we want to just talk a little bit about Merthyr. We talked earlier about 3 great kind of Scottish legends. How much of the kind of Merthyrness runs through you and ran through the Pocket Devils, or is that what Svengali kind of tells us, I suppose?
I was massive, you know. I'm a Merthyr boy, born and bred. Where you come from kind of shapes you and makes you what you are. I was very lucky to sort of come from a good working class background. My old man, you know, had good jobs in heavy industry. You know, extended family, lots of cousins. Still have massive family in Merthyr. I kind of won the lottery a little bit, you know, in the sense I grew up in the 70s when, you know, the NHS was strong and the welfare state, schools were very, very good. And there's even a theory I've read recently that because of work being so difficult in the valleys, the comprehensive schools there had fantastic teachers in there who were happy just to have work, you know, that probably could have been on in higher education or other places of learning, really. So I remember my school was very good. And so I had a very good grounding, Steve, in what, you know, I was going to be, you know, I don't know, I sort of, the art as well, I was never not encouraged to be in a band, you know, and I was never that thing where there wasn't somebody who was also into sort of the same stuff as me, you know, like the music and the fashion and the football. You know, there was the fanzine culture, Dial M for Merthyr had started.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
In the late 80s, so I was writing for that.
Oh, wow.
So I just remember it really well. Do you know, I remember a night being on your show, right? Me and Glenn were on the show and Merthyr were playing. Oh, yeah. And you were like talking about the result of the game all the way through. So we were doing like we were going back to Pendarren Park.
Were they playing Cardiff then? Were they? Must have been playing Cardiff.
No, they weren't playing Cardiff. They were playing playing Swansea, I think, in the Welsh Cup.
Okay.
And you kept coming back to us because we were Merthyr boys and saying, like, you know, because obviously we used to go and watch the Martyrs as well, you know. So that's what everybody in Merthyr did. They went to watch the Martyrs and the Bluebirds. That's what we did. And I just remember you keep going up to the Merthyr to the result, and we'd have a chat about it in between, talking about I think we were talking about acid jazz that day and all stuff like that, you know, because I think that was the thing that was happening. So I remember that really well. Just said, come on the show, boys, we'll have a chat tonight about like football and music. It was great.
Yeah, I mean, Tony and I were talking about this earlier as well. You know, we both got pretty humble beginnings, you know, me and Tony, and it's kind of part of our, I suppose it's part of lots of people's consciousness, but it's particularly, I suppose, going back to the 3 Scottish guys again, that kind of working class thing where, you know, football runs through your veins. I mean, so does the kind of music and that kind of everyday stuff. You know, it's so kind of priceless, isn't it? When you think how the music industry is threatened these days.
I know it sounds a cliche, but it's a cliche because it's true. But you know, the old roots out were, you know, the arts and sport. You know, in the valleys it tended to be football, boxing, rugby, and then it was obviously stuff like singing, being in a band, being an actor. They were seen as the roots out, you know, sort of to a better life in a way. But, you know, I always think, especially music and football, was so intertwined.
Yes.
That
Yes.
it's almost him. But I remember somebody was talking about this the other day in London to me, how much in the 80s and the 70s, especially sort of from the mid 70s on, musicians were encouraged not to say they were into football because football was seen as a bit dangerous, you know, and an area where they shouldn't be, you know, the terraces and all that. And that changed hugely then, with, especially with Oasis, when they just went, we're Man City fans and that's it. But you were doing it. You were doing it before then. You used to talk about football and music on your show. So it's really interesting. It was always there bubbling away. And you could see why it became huge then. It's almost hard to us to imagine now football and music not existing together because of the way Sky does its coverage and all that. But it didn't then. It didn't in the 80s. There was there's a great line from Paul Weller saying that when said he was a Chelsea fan, he was told not to mention that during the 80s because, you know, it just wasn't a done thing in the press. But that's changed massively now. And like I said, I always felt that the two kind of ran together really in popular culture.
Yeah, we both, I know, speaking for Tony, we both totally get that. I love that, actually.
Yeah.
You said about nuts and bolts, Johnny.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm going to say something a bit weird, you know, I've known you a long time, I mean, not to embarrass you, you're so photogenic, and you got that really good, you know, you're a really good looking guy, you know, and I mean, did that open the door to get you, was that what got you in from, because you kind of done not much of that type before, you took you straight in, is that what kind of what happened, or, you know, had you some acting experience, or how did it work?
No, exactly right, Steve. Pretty much that. The casting director, there's a guy called Anthony Jenkins. He'd seen me on TV doing some stuff with the Pocket Devils, and he said to me, "Look, there's a character in the series who's in a band, and he's from Merthyr, and how fortuitous is that for me?" And he said, "Would you be interested in coming and doing some auditions?" And I was a bit like, I've never acted before. I've never even been like, you know, the spear carrier in the school play. I was never even that. But he was like, well, look, see what you think. Come down and do some auditions. And I did that, and we did some screen tests. It took about 2 months. And at the end, they offered me the part. And then that was 9 months' work on decent money. And I never forget it. I was just finishing university, and I just had my daughter, Katie, at the time. And I was like, I got to take this. And I did it. And then from there, you get an agent. And then I kind of had a reasonably decent career in acting. But in the meantime, I had another stroke of luck, was that the head of ITV Wales drama, Peter Edwards, he heard me talking about football one day on set, and when you love your football, and I was like, yeah. And he said to me, well, I'm going to introduce you to the head of ITV Wales sport. Wow. So I had a chat to him, and he said to me, well, you know, he said, well, would you be interested in coming in and doing some stuff for us, like a bit of research and all the rest of it? And I was like, okay. So I kind of fell into that, really, very lucky.
This is Soccer Sunday now, Johnny, yeah?
I was Soccer Sunday, and I ended up presenting Soccer Sunday, and I worked right through. I went as researcher, assistant producer, and then I was presenting and running it in the end. And it was great because, you know, they used to get huge audience figures because it was the only football programme in Wales. Right. So you'd have like 1.5 million views, you know, because it was half the country watching it, because it was Cardiff, Wrexham, and Swansea, Wrexham in the Football League then. But, you know, so that made me, so in Wales, even now, if I come back down, mostly people say to me about Soccer Sunday, you know, or reading the football results, because I read them for a long time. So I used to do the whole, you know, Cardiff City 3, Swansea 0. I used to do all that.
Say that one again. Say that one again. Say that one again.
Cardiff City 3, Swansea 0. So I used to do that. So people always go, oh, Johnny, do the results for us. And I'd read them out and all the rest of it. So that was a great time in my life, because I got to watch football. And again, Wales was buzzing at that time, because we just had the stadium built, and we had all the FA Cups and the League Cups, and all the sporting events were going on in the middle of Cardiff. That was just a brilliant time to be in Cardiff, living sort of the early noughties, from about 1999. That whole 5 or 6 years, I just absolutely loved it in the city, and I was right in the middle of it. You know, you knew you were in a good city where lots was happening. Yeah.
But did you work with Julie Kizik during that time, Soccer Sunday? Do you remember Julie Kizik?
No, I was with Bob Simmons. I was the Bob.
Bob, yeah.
And I was with Rodri, and who else was there? Oh, Steve, who's passed away now, from Newport. He was the presenter there for a little bit. And a lady, Sean, was there working with me. I think she's on Radio Wales now. We used to do Top Sport together. So that was my kind of my period and era. And they were all lovely as well. They were all good people, like, helped you. And it was a good time to be there, actually, working. It was the old big place in Culverhouse Cross. Do you remember?
Yeah.
I was in there every day, and it was a good time. It's a good time.
That's a great job to have, I think.
Yeah.
Did you continue to be a Cardiff City fan at that time, or did you hide your fanness?
I was pretty all right, actually, in the sense of I was obviously able to be quite neutral when I was talking on screen, because you have to be. But when I go down to the vets, Jacks, they found out pretty quickly I was a Cardiff fan. The internet then was taking off. But they were always great. Like, they'd always do this. It was the early days of selfies. You'd expect them to be like more antagonistic, but they were not. They'd always go like, "All right, Bat, all right, Mush," as they say. Can we have a selfie? And I'd be like, yeah. So I'd always have what you'd call friendly banter with them. Fair play. They never, ever said anything mean or derogatory. Certainly not my face. They might have on the web. I don't care about
probably.
That. Yeah. But to face, they were always just a good laugh, and you'd have a bit of fun, and you'd have a chat to them, and they were great, And Wrexham I was given the Wrexham job for nearly 2 years, so I was the reporter there. So I got to know their fans quite well, really. Yeah, and they were great. They were Wrexham. They were always good. Good. I'd like Wrexham to come back in the Football League. I think Wrexham Football League club. And I'm delighted Newport are back in there. The more Welsh clubs in there, the better for me.
Yeah,
Newport looking good. They're top of the table, aren't they?
And 2 boys in the Wales squad. Unbelievable.
Yeah, incredible, isn't it?
Fantastic. Very good. Really, I'm really proud of them, really.
I don't think they like Cardiff City fans.
Oh, they hate us, but it's weird because it's been patronising, because we don't really hate them, which I think annoys them.
We don't really care, do we?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we don't really care. But I'm glad to see him doing well, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Tony and I, both lifelong Cardiff City fans. And Tony, we both wanted to talk to you a little bit about that lovely video you did, filmed at Ninian. And Tony wanted to talk to you about it in particular, actually.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, it really stands out in my memory. I watched it again, doing my homework again, watched it again. But yeah, I mean, I think when you're a kid and you go to Ninian Park, it was such a special place, got so many great it was a combination of I think it's a combination of excitement and fear, and it was kind of an intense thing when you went to Ninian Park. Nobody can really explain it unless they've been there when you were a kid, I think, So I absolutely loved the place, and I think that little feature you did before the FA Cup final really showed the passion the Cardiff fans have, but also a few things that resonated with me. You were saying about you mentioned about how football had kind of been suppressed quite a bit in Wales, and that rugby, was the premier thing. And I remember I related to Steve earlier on that I absolutely love football, and in school I didn't get the opportunity to play it apart from on the lunch break with my mates, just kicking the ball around in your shoe sort of thing, no trainers, because it was lunchtime, but it was all rugby. So it was great to hear that, that passion coming out in the piece that you did, the feature you did.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing how much it's changed, isn't it, since I did that. Because football, obviously, because of what happened in the Euros and the team we have now, and players like Gareth Bale and Aaron Ramsey, the attitude of football has changed massively, in that time. But when I made the piece, which I think was for 2008, you did feel that the football was kind of marginalised, really, and the sport of the establishment, as I like to call it, was rugby. That's just a fact. Like you said, in school, even in Merthyr Tydfil, which is a football town, rugby was the thing that we did during PE lessons, even though we wanted to play football. So you're right. And I think the thing with me was I used to go to watch Merthyr play as a young boy, like 7, 8, with my father. And then I wasn't allowed to go to Cardiff on my own, which makes it even more attractive and interesting when you're a kid. Do you know what I mean? My older brother was allowed to go. And then when I got to 14, I was allowed to go to watch Cardiff City on my own. And like you said, it was slightly dangerous, which makes it even more sexy when you're that age, because of the crowds and the Bob Bank and all the rest of it. So going to watch Cardiff was like an event, really, like a day out. You get the train down from Merthyr, what it was like walking to the ground, what it was like in the ground leaving. It was a proper day out, really. Do you know what I mean? And but it was something incredibly exciting. That's really hard to tell a younger generation that have never known the terraces and what it was like to be in Ninian Park, which is a bit of a shame for them. But I wouldn't change it for the world what Ninian Park was like there and what I experienced there. There was nothing like it. And looking back as well, what's crazy is there were games where I go, I remember that game in the FA Cup against, say, QPR, where we drew 0-0, but it was a big crowd. And I look, and the crowd was like 11,000. And you go, now it's like you're getting 18, 20,000 every game. But then seeing 11,000 in Ninian Park in like 1988 was like a big crowd. Do you know what I mean? So how much things have changed, But in my mind's eye, especially sort of the mid-80s, when the Bob Bank used to sing and sway and all that, There was nothing like that. It was nothing like standing there when you're 17, 18 years of age, surrounded by your mates in the middle of all that. It was so intoxicatingly exciting. I can't begin to explain what it was like, really.
No, I mean, I don't know if you ever went into Grange End when it was the original Grange End.
I'm too young for that.
Right, I remember I was probably only, I don't know, 5 or 6, or I might have been a bit older than that, I don't know, but having to walk up all these planks, and there was holes through the planks, and the planks would move when you step on them, they were bouncing up and down. So you sort of go up to as high as you could. And I used to cling on to the side. My dad used to put me up on the side where the corrugated iron was. And I used to hang on and look because I couldn't see above the heads. But I distinctly remember everybody used to jump up and down, So these planks, you'd be bouncing up and down on the planks, and you go, am I going to get out alive? I only want to watch a football match, But it's exactly those things that you say, those things stick in your memory. It was unique, it was brilliant.
I loved it. I went to watch a match. I went to watch Wales-England play in 1982 with my grandfather, and I was in the enclosure in the grandstand, and the English brought about 10,000 fair play. It was about 40-odd thousand. It's the old home internationals, and I can vividly remember about an hour into the game, my grandfather saying to me, "Are you going to watch the game, or are you just going to watch the crowds?" So I was just watching the Bob Rank.
That's so true.
So true, because I was like, look at the colour and the way they're moving and swaying and the arms going up.
Yeah.
I just remember watching the crowds more than the game.
Yeah, that's lovely. And we've interviewed some of the ex-players, Johnny, on here. Gary Bell, Derek Brazil. I've got Adrian Alston, by the way, I'm in touch with at the moment.
All right.
Really up for one. He's in Australia, obviously. But and they all talk about it. They all talk about that, playing in front of that crowd. That thing you're talking about when they're kind of swaying. And when a goal goes in, they're all kind of running down the terraces and whatever, flowing back. And, crazy stuff. Beautiful days, dangerous days, but great days, really.
Yeah. There's something about it. No two ways about it.
Going back to other things apart from football and music for a while. A Mind to Kill. I noticed you were involved with that. Is that right? With Di Shell, because we interviewed Di Shell. Did you get to meet Di at all?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did. I did quite a lot of Welsh sort of series during that time, because obviously there's some staples there. There was Mind to Kill, which I think was on Channel 5 as well, and obviously he had Phil Maddock there, was Merthyr-born and all the rest of it. And but I did quite a few. It's like a few things that pop up every so often, and people go, "Oh, you were in this and you were in that," and I was like, "Oh yeah, I forgot I was in that." You know what I mean? I was like, I think I was in. Somebody wrote me the day going, "Oh yeah, you were in Doctor Who," and I was never in Doctor Who, and they were like, "Yeah, you were in the spin-off Torchwood." I was like, "Oh yeah, I did have 2 episodes of Torchwood."
Yeah.
Not to slip my mind, but I was like, "Yes, I did do that." You know what I mean? So it's weird because you'd pick up like a week here and there, really. Do you know what I mean? I had the staple, which was Nuts and Bolts, which ran for 4 years, and then I'd have like other series, and sometimes I'd get like in stuff like Murphy's Law, which is the big Jimmy Nesbitt series, and I'd get stuff like that. But then it was the Welsh dramas that you'd pick up and you do, and it was interesting because it was a whole industry. There still is, with Doctor Who and Casualty being filmed there, but there were far more things that were filmed in Wales about Wales back then, 20 years ago. If you know, the regions are much stronger, a bit like the radio stations, So Red Dragon, for argument's sake, used to have huge listenership because the regions, and HTV was the same. HTV was a big station getting big viewing figures, and would have its own drama, its own light ends, its own docs, its own sport, very sort of regionally independent, and I was very lucky to be around in those days, I think.
That's an interesting point, because all of that has gone.
Yeah, I know.
Di Shell, of course, picked up a BAFTA, didn't he, for the sound for A Mind to Kill, actually?
Yes, he did. Yeah. He was working in the sound. He was sort of in. I was saying earlier on, up in Culbrose Cross, there was a huge building, and they built it famously when everything was huge, just before everything went tiny. So just before computers came in and went tiny, so all this space there. But he used to work on one of the big studios up on Culbrose Cross. So I used to go in and have a cup of coffee with him when I had time, and he just let him tell me stories of rock and roll. Do you know what I mean?
Amazing guy, amazing stories, fantastically talented, great musician. Toured with everyone. Amazing guy.
Great guy.
Something which came up last night, which I didn't even know anything about, which I was totally surprised about. You ended up in a Keane video, is that right?
I did, yeah. I did. So I got to be quite matey with Irving Welsh about 15 years ago. He seen me in something and liked me and cast me, and then we got to be really pally. And then every so often he'd say to me, "Oh, I got this, I got that," because most of the time he was writing, but people used to offer him other stuff. And I tended to be the person he'd ring up and say, "Do you want to come and do this for me?" And there was a video by the band Gene. Remember Gene?
Yeah, just about. Yeah.
So they did a video, and he asked me to be in that. And then about 2 years later, he said to me, oh, the band Keane want me to do a video. And I was like, okay. So he said to me, I got an idea of, we're going to film it, you coming out of the sea. You're going to look like crossed in Jesus and Jim Morrison. I was like, okay. And then I'm going to film you walking on a beach, and it's going to be based on the old Bergman film Seventh Seal. And I was like, yeah, sounds brilliant, Irvin. All right. And then I went, hang on, when are you filming this? And he was like, January. And I was like, January? In the sea. So anyway, they had to get me a wetsuit.
Yeah.
And I think it's still on YouTube. It's had like millions of hits because they're massive in like South America or somewhere, I think. But it's still there, me coming out of the sea, soaking wet with a beard and a thing, filmed all day. And I couldn't get dry and I couldn't get warm, but I was all right with it. I was doing that Welsh singer going, I'm all right. You know, they just brought me a cup of tea every now and then. But I'll never forget when I got in that night at the hotel, that hot bath I had was the best bath I've ever had in my life. You can't get dry when you're in the, can't get warm, sorry, when you've been in the sea in this country in January. I wouldn't recommend it.
No, but I'll check that video out later. I've not seen that. Leading you into the Nottingham stuff, because obviously it's quite a rich territory of interview material. If we start off with, let's start off with Vicky, firstly, with your connection to the area. How did you first meet her? Was it through This Is England? Maybe? No,
it was Svengali. So basically, she was cast. Well, I wrote the part of Michelle, who was my partner in Svengali. Michael Smiley, the Irish comedian, who's a great mate of mine, says I groomed her. That's not the case. I wrote the part, right? And then I offered it to her via her agent.
Yeah.
And she went for it, bless her. So she wanted to do the part. So then we met, and then we met on set, and we fell for one another. And she ended up moving to London with me. This is back about nearly 10 years ago. And we spent a year together in London. But she was quite homesick. She's a Nottingham girl, and she got strong roots. And I was like, that's fine. So we were spending a lot of time going back and forth. And then she just said, well, should we move up to Nottingham and see how we get on? So I was like, yeah, that's fine. So we moved up to Nottingham in 2011. And when I moved up there, what happened was the local TV channels found out that I'd done a lot of sports stuff in Wales. And bless them, they asked me would I be interested in looking after the football show up in Nottingham. So I said, yeah, I'm fine with that. So I was producing that. And then the head of the Nottingham TV channel said to me, I've always thought the story of the Nottingham Forest team in the late 70s, the great Clough Double European Cup winning team, is a great story. And I was like, yeah, I think it's a great story. I remember it as a young boy growing up there, Kit and John Robertson and Trevor Francis, the original. So then I started making that for their local TV station, a documentary. But I realized quite quickly, I thought to myself, I think this is a bigger story than that. So I took it down to Universal, who I'd just done Svengali with. So once you get these relationships, and I took it back into them, and I went, look, I'm going to do this next. It's a bit different from doing a drama about music. I'm doing a documentary about football. I'm blessed. And they went, great, let's do it. Let's give you the money to finish it. Then Baby Cow, Steve Coogan's company, Henry Normal, finished that. And then it went out in 2015, and it was, even for me, really, an unexpected success. And it was the biggest grossing sports film at the UK box office in 2015. It did really, really well. And that was it then, Steve. What they do is they once you have a success, they give you the money to make another one then, because they think, oh, he's got half a chance.
That's where I went wrong, Johnny.
So I was a bit like, okay, so I did that. And then really, which I think make you laugh, the year later, Forest get taken over by the Greek shipping magnate, Marinakis, who's got like the biggest, oil tanker fleet in the world. And he asks to meet me because he's watched the film. So I go to meet him in Knightsbridge, and we have a chat, and we get on really well. And he goes, I like the film, blah, blah, blah. And what do you think about Forest? And I was like, well, I've lived in Nottingham. They are a massive football club. And in my opinion, if you did this, this, and this, you'd certainly get the fans on your side there. So then he says, he finishes, I never forget, he says to me, do you want to come and work for me? Do you want to come on the board? And I was like, no, it's not for me. I haven't got time. I'm too busy doing films and all the rest of it. And he says to me, well, what if I pay you this? And I remember going, do you want me to start Monday? Or do you want me to start tomorrow? So I was like, I'm in. Do you know what I mean?
Wow.
So then I ended up doing stuff for them on the board, and I ended up looking after their media and communications, and I've been there since, really. And it's been a great experience being behind the scene, because I was one of those football fans. I was a football fan. I'd obviously worked in media, but I was very much of the opinion that if you did this in a football club, this would be better. And if you did that, that would be better, which we've all got the right to do. But once you work for a football club, you realise how difficult it is, because once you do something there, it affects something there. It's like Jenga almost. Do you know what I mean? The finances and It's really interesting. So I've had a good experience of being the other side of that really, and obviously I've got to know them. I've been down to Cardiff a few times and been in the boardroom and yeah, and Bowley, like, and all the boys are like, "Oh, come you working for them? Come work for us." I'm like, "I will in time." But it's like, it's a great experience, and it's an odd story of how I got there through a film and then the owner liking it. But it's one I've really enjoyed really, and I've kind of seen football from a different viewpoint, which I think can only help sometimes.
It's a really interesting one, that. So when you come back to City with Forest, you're supporting Forest, are you?
Well, it's really interesting you should ask that, because I think Radio Wales started calling it the Jonny Owen Derby, which is a bit of a piss take. But what happened is, obviously, because when I work in the media and comms, I have to wear, not during COVID, but you have to wear the club tie and a suit. Every club does it. So I have to wear that. But bless them at Forest, when I go to Cardiff, they don't make me wear the club tie. They let me wear I wear a Merthyr tie to be neutral.
Oh, nice.
So that's my kind of get out of jail card. But it was very funny last time in Cardiff, because I went down with the Forest board, and they sit you in a very specific part of the grandstand, and they all go in, and I sat down, and literally straight away somebody went out, "All right, John, how's it going?" I was like, "All right, John." How's it going, Johnny? I was like, "All right, yeah." So it was just like being back home, like, do you know what I mean? So it was very nice. It's always great to go back down to Cardiff.
So I Believe in Miracles obviously was the thing which did so well.
Yeah.
Because the Damned United was, the thing with the stuff with, the Clough kind of story itself with Martin Sheen, another Welsh lad, of course.
Yes.
That was also massive. The book is fantastic. I don't know if you read it. The book is great.
That's a great book. Yeah, David Peace. Yeah. It's great. It's funny. I seen Sheeny, as they call him, in a lift in the Soho Hotel last year, and I got in, and he was there, and he was promoting something with the press. I was down there doing some editing. And I went, and he went, "Oh, how's it going on?" "Yeah, blah, blah." And obviously mine's a doc. But we just sort of said, I said, "Well, look, if ever they make it into a drama, that period of Clough when he starts winning the European Cups, you'd be the man to play it." He's a huge fan of Brian Clough, Sheeny, because of that. Do you know what I mean? But I thought, it was a good film. They did it really, really well, because football's so difficult to do in a dramatic sense. They say among filmmakers, boxing is the easiest to do. That's why you get beautiful stuff like Raging Bull and Rocky. Football's the most difficult. And I think the recreation of football by actors is impossible, because footballers just look and move a certain way, and no actor can really get near that ever, in my opinion, because they're footballers. They are one in a million sort of human beings, really. Do you know what I mean? Everything about them. So, but they did a good job, I felt, because it was mostly about stuff off the pitch.
The amazing thing with Martin Sheen is, he's, as you know, he's quite the intellectual, and very politically sound.
Yeah,
he's done some amazing stuff about Wales and Welshness and our culture, and how Wales gets treated as this kind of, get on with being Welsh kind of thing, and how it's the poor cousin in a lot of ways to England. I don't know if you've seen any of that stuff, but it's quite amazing stuff. Yeah,
he speaks brilliantly. He's obviously a very, very bright man, and he's got sound, in my opinion, sound political views and roots. And I really admired him for what he says and what he does. Because ultimately, especially when you're in his position, where he is kind of, enough, Hollywood A-list in many respects.
Yes.
You do make yourself a target, and you could have an easy life yourself just by keeping your head down. So I kind of admire Michael for what he does and what he says, and those speeches he made about the NHS and what Bevan give to the world, and are extraordinary. And because he's such a brilliant performer as well, he's able to convey them even more sort of beautifully than the words. So it's so important. I mean, that thing he did in the one show when he starts talking about Wales, I mean, I think it was just off the cuff. It was remarkable. Do you know what I mean? He starts going on about, like, and I was thinking to myself, fair play to you. He's a good lad, and a great role model, I think, for Welsh people.
Wasn't he involved in a homeless football as well last year? I think in Cardiff, and I think he put all his own money into that. It's just amazing story, really, really brilliant.
I went to the one in Glasgow, which I think was 2016. They asked me to pop along and support the Welsh team, so I was there, and they were good too. They did all right, but it was very funny because they set it up in St George's Square, and they set up like some stands and all the rest of it. And there's teams from all over the world, and then Wales come on, and obviously there's like, because it's in Glasgow, it's just me. So of course we score, and I'm like, yes, come on, boys! Kind of Vicky said she was watching bits of the back on YouTube. She was like, I can hear you shouting. I was like, wow, Wales are playing. Do you know what I mean? What do you expect? Do you know what I mean? But yeah, it was. It's a wonderful thing they do with the homeless football. Really important.
Yeah, and I think he's got a touch of Burton about him. I think he's something really special.
Yes,
actually. I think he's got a big career still to come.
I agree.
Taking you on to "Don't Take Me Home," of course. Now, of course, the song, right? I believe, is written by the Cardiff City fans in honor of Mr. Marky Mackay, but of course, it became another thing.
It did, yeah. There's talk about it. Newcastle fans have a claim to it before that.
It was City.
It was City. Yeah, we'll take it. But it's the Billy Ray Cyrus song, isn't it? Achy Breaky Heart, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
But I always feel, because we were Welsh football fans growing up, the misery of being a Welsh football fan because of the nearly misses and all those kind of, how difficult it was to qualify, and the great teams we had that nearly qualified in groups now, remember, with world champions. People forget in 92, we didn't qualify by 1 point, and in the group was West Germany and Belgium in our group, and we nearly qualified. And at the time, Germany were the World Cup holders. So that's how difficult it's been.
Yeah. So
to finally get there was just the most remarkable thing. And I had given up, I'd be honest with you, I was, at that point, after the Russia game in 2002, wasn't it? I was a bit like, I don't think we're ever going to do it. I just think it's too difficult to get through the European qualifying rounds. Anyway, we qualified, which was incredible. And then, in my opinion, it's like as if God or the higher power or whatever you want to call the universe goes, oh, do you know what? I've been a bit hard on this lot. They can have it all back, look, in one tournament. And then we go to the tournament and we're brilliant. You know, we beat, teams like, Russia with the dark horses at the time. People forget this now. We beat a really good Slovakia team with Hamic in it. We beat the tournament favourites in Belgium. We didn't sort of bumble along there. We did. And then, we go out to an extraordinary Ronaldo goal. But it's the fact the fans were considered to be one of the great fans of the tournament, and the way we behaved and the culture and the clothes and the bucket hats and all. It was just like a perfect storm, really, of everything came together, and I knew it really, in the sense of, once we won the first game in Bordeaux, which I couldn't believe, and there was a momentum starting. But that first anthem in Bordeaux, I remember being there, and like grown men crying and people hugging each other. And I think that's what happened, in the sense of Wales finally understood, and not in a mean sense, in a told you sense, but they realised how important football was, how we can be brilliant in rugby, which we are, but to be good in football, is just huge on a worldwide stage. We'd totally sort of broken out and become the sports story of the world that summer, and everybody kind of knew who Wales were. It was a brilliant thing. Do you know what I mean? Just going to get rid of that.
But just to say, Johnny, Tony and I are almost. I know Tony's thinking the same thing as me. This is music to our ears. I'm sorry, but I'm not a massive rugby fan, and no matter how much the local media bangs me on the head with the rugby ball, it ain't for me. As not my sport. My sport is football, and I love Cardiff City Football Club. Yeah. And it's the forgotten cousin in Wales. Football is there's the Ramball as well, is there? Which came first, sort of thing. And for the Welsh media to wake up to and then realise, hang on. Not only this is Wales being absolutely brilliant at sport and doing something remarkable, and it just brought all the attention to Wales, and it was, for me, just a huge sigh of relief at last,
Oh, it was beautiful, and I remember saying when we qualified, Radio Wales had me on going, oh, what do you think, Johnny? And I was like, I live in England, I've lived here for, 10, 15 years now. I can't begin to tell you how big football is in this country and on a worldwide stage, and how irrelevant rugby is. You're lucky if rugby makes 3 pages inside any sports newspaper. So if Wales wakes up this morning, they have to realise people are going to start knowing who we are now. I can't begin to explain to you how big it's going to be. And then when we go there, I think what was brilliant was a lot of the Welsh media woke up to that and went, wow, it is as big as people are saying. Do you know what I mean? And it was just great. I wasn't just the team. As you said, it was the fans. I thought the fans were remarkable, and what we developed outside the petri dish of international football, ironically, was a whole new culture. In England, you had the German bombers type fans who hang on an Irish pub, fine. Then you had on the other side, you had the Irish who wear the wigs, and then it's something in the middle developed in Wales, which was beautiful, with where lads wore bucket hats and those replica tops and Adidas trainers and sang this new song, and everybody went, "Oh, what's this?" And it was beautiful because it was going, well, this is Wales with its own culture, its own football culture that's developed, and the Welsh FA, a lot of credit. I mean, what the Welsh FA have turned into in the last 20 years with people like Mark Evans there. We used to think of them as this old bunch of blazers, bless them. And now there's this young dynamic organisation with great social media who encourage fans to watch with the team, you know, like put out bilingual stuff. And suddenly the Welsh FA, you go, the English FA after 2016 went to Wales to study what they did. You know, that's what we're almost leading what football associations are doing. And I just thought to myself, I was never as proud of being Welsh. I'm really proud of being Welsh anyway. But 2016, I thought my heart was going to burst. And when I come back to England and people in Nottingham saying, we thought you were brilliant, you and your fans, I was just a bit like, oh, it's lovely to know that, you know?
Yeah. I mean, people like my brother-in-law, he's 6'8", so I don't argue with him very much, but he's he's a massive rugby fan. And him and lots of other rugby fans, actually, Welsh rugby fans, it was a pilgrimage. Let's go to France. We got to be part of this. This is all about Wales. And that was nice as well, you know?
I loved it. I know the fact that everybody was so welcoming, you know, everybody went, you know, that homecoming was extraordinary, the biggest homecoming of any sporting team ever. Also the highest viewing figures ever in Welsh sporting history for the Belgium game, you know. You know, all those facts were happening. And I think we're starting to see now as well, is I think the effect of Giggs, in a sense, was Bale and Ramsey, because Giggs was so high profile, not for Wales so much, but definitely for domestically. Kids started playing more and more football, which we always did, but really started being taken seriously. The two academies in Cardiff and Swansea were very important 10, 15 years ago. We've seen the players they produced, you know, like your Gunters and your Ramseys, and now the Swansea Academy. And all of a sudden you realise, well, there's going to be more and more generations coming through now. That's the effect of it as well. The Welsh FA is brilliantly set up. The academies are strong. The two clubs are always knocking around the top of the Championship and looking to try and get back in the Premier League. It's only going to mean more and more kids coming through and playing football, which I think is very, very bodes well for the future for me.
I'm talking to Ryan Giggs.
I know.
What I mean, obviously we can't say much because it's at all, but it's just a real shame, isn't it, that this is going on when things are, you know, the bubble's looking so good for Wales, you know.
Well, Wales have been playing brilliantly, but you know, obviously it's a serious charge, and you know, nobody's guilty until proven so. But I think the Welsh FA have done the right thing really in saying we're going to wait until see what the thing is. But you know, he can't be in charge at the moment. So I think at the moment they've played it really well, and we'll just have to see what the outcome is.
Yeah, and Rob Page, of course, has gotten the big promotion for a few games.
Yeah, it was brilliant.
Is he Merthyr boy? Is he Merthyr boy?
No, he's from the Valleys. He's not Merthyr.
Right,
Mark Pembridge is the Merthyr boy. Who's been in charge of the Fulham Academy, which has done really well. But you know, he's very popular, and a lot of people are saying, you know, he's done. He'll do a good job. It'll be interesting because the name obviously that was mentioned, if it turns out that Ryan has to leave, was Chris Coleman coming back for the next Euros, which is an interesting one. But so it's all open for them. But you know, the thing is, the way they play now, which is much more possession based, which is fascinating for me, because to play that Hungary game was a whole new experience. Because even in 2016, you sometimes felt we've got to hold on here, but it was so comfortable in the way they played football. I thought to myself, well, something's really happening to us really as a country. We're really finding our feet and being confident, and especially after 2018, where we nearly qualified again, and I think somebody just had a stat after only 25% of the games were Bale, Ramsey and Joe Allen on the pitch. Well, any team will miss their three best players at that point. And we'd nearly qualified for that World Cup. So I think we're living in the golden era of Welsh football. I really do. I think we've got one of the best players in the world playing for us, and we're qualifying for tournaments.
Yeah, I like that. And we've got lots of really, really good young players coming through. Some of them,
absolutely,
barely even heard of them. They put down the pitch and they're great, you know.
No, I totally agree.
Talking about sport, talk sport.
Yeah.
So getting into radio, that came through your TV and kind of film stuff. Was a kind of natural progression into that? Was it?
Yeah. What happened was I've been doing the films. I've been doing quite a bit of talk sport in the sense of, like, you know, doing interviews. And the head of talk sport, a lovely guy called Lee Clayton, he heard me on a Sunday, and he went to me, you know, you sound very comfortable and you've got a nice voice, you know, the Welsh lilt, and you talk about football well. Would you be interested in maybe trying to do something with us? And I was a bit like, well, okay. And I did some stuff with them, and then and they really liked it. So then they offered me a show then on a Sunday, which I think was, we ran it for a few weeks, and then they offered me a year then. So I'm going to do a year coming up to the end of this season. So I've really enjoyed it. It's great to get people on, get great guests. I mean, TalkSport's become a beast now, really. I think it's the most popular sports station in the world. So you're always got to be really careful, because if you say something and you get it a little bit wrong, you have like about 40 texts and tweets. People go, no, it was 1982, not 81. You're like, oh,
Yeah,
so you've got to be on the money. Do you know what I mean? But
yeah.
that's a lovely thing. So yeah, I'm just really enjoying it. And I just started last month. The Times offered me like a column, so I'm doing a column for them as well, which is like a bit bizarre for the boy. Yeah, so I'm just I'm very lucky at the moment, really, with the football side of things, and doing a few things I enjoy.
So I don't know, Tony. Have we had any comments coming in at all on the live stream? Anybody can remember anything interesting or useful? Because we didn't promote it at all. We just kind of did it.
No, we just sort of spontaneous.
Oh, that's all right.
But we'll share it afterwards, and I'm sure there'll be some comments in there then. So working with Mark Webster, what's Mark Webster like then?
Oh, he's brilliant. He's an old soul DJ, isn't he? He was on Kiss FM, I think, when he first started and stuff. He's a great lad. He's got a great sense of humour. So he always makes you laugh, which is really important on radio. And he's a veritable font of information, as I said.
Oh, good line.
Yeah. So he's in my accent as well. He's like, "You're a veritable font." I was like, "Yeah." So he's kind of like, he's always there to use a football expression to receive the ball. If you're on radio with somebody and you've got somebody who's always going to be willing to take the ball, it's always a good thing. I'll ask the next question, or you want me to say this. So yeah, he's been great, and I've really enjoyed working with him. He's a lot of fun.
Because what you say there, because as you know, I worked in radio a long time ago now. But so when you're working with a co-presenter, that relationship actually, it can work or it can not work. So it's about the chemistry, and it tends to be sometimes you end up one person who tends to lead all the time or talks over you, and it's a bit of an art actually, isn't it? Making that on-air thing work,
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's only a part of the reason, but it's important you get on in real life. We do get on, we socialise, so we'll go for a pint before and after the show and in the week. So we'll always have a chat and sort of, work out what we can do with the show. So we like each other, which is, always a good start. And then we got a bit of a system going, silence, where if I go to say something, he goes to say something, you do a bit of that, It's like sort of leading a little division. So I just... he's been great, and we do sort of swap. So you get in a rhythm, like I'll ask a question, you ask a question, I'll ask a question, you ask a question. And the same with the links, sometimes I'll just go, I'll start it, you finish it. And you almost get to a point where it's a bit like shorthands, where you just go, I'll know, and all the rest of it. But it is interesting, because sometimes you can get into a position where you think, I want to ask something now, and they'll ask the question, and you just got to work it out between the two of you, I suppose.
Like me and Tony, we argue all the time. Cat and dog,
Yeah.
He can't even talk now. He's speechless.
Tony, are you still there?
So you lost your audio at the moment.
Oh, he's gone. See, bless.
Oh, I'm back on. I'm back on.
Good lad. I think he did that on purpose, Tony.
Just to demonstrate, yeah. We got a couple of comments come in as well. As Chris Phillips said, he's seen the premiere of Svengali in Bryn Mawr Cinema. There were scooters everywhere.
It was, yeah.
And Clint Evans has said, I've taken a day off because I've got lots of things to do. You've bloody ruined that now. Great show, lads.
God bless you, Clint.
They're both really good people, actually. They're really good writers, and they love their music and they love their football, by the way, which is nice.
Yes.
I was going to say about this professional radio stuff, getting into professional radio. Is it just kind of fun? Is it kind of pressurized at all?
But no, like anything, I think I was nervous at the start. I remember I feel like first few shows a bit sleepless, and because it's a new thing. But I've always felt, I know you're the same. It's good to test yourself, isn't it? It's always good to have that nerves before something.
Yes.
To do something where you feel like,
this morning.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm just a bit like. I just thought myself, I haven't been really nervous before something for a long time. It's good to do it. It's good to remind yourself that sometimes you need that so you feel quite alive then. And you do wonder at the time why I do it. But when you've done it, the feeling afterwards is kind of worth it. So I'm kind of much more relaxed now, in the sense of but just before you go on air, you remember what it's like. Just before the red light comes on and you're talking to lots of people, it's always a little bit in your stomach where you go, right, I've got to be on this now and I've got to be ready.
Yeah, I think those nerves, they've always stayed with me, and I think that's always a really good thing, because it keeps you on your game. You talked about having a drink with Mark before and sometimes after the show. I once had a drink during a a show for the BBC Radio Wales. I could admit it now, because I'd fallen out with my co-presenter, who was just totally dominating everything, and he had all his ideas lined up. I thought I might as well go down the pub. I went down the BBC club, had a pint and a bag of nuts, and went back again. Nobody even noticed, probably.
No, exactly. Yeah, I know what you're saying. No,
tatters, but there you go.
I know. Yeah, I maybe I'll try that when Mark's talking.
I wouldn't recommend it. Tony knows a BBC club as well.
Yeah.
Going back to the last couple of questions, Johnny. Thanks ever so much for doing this. It's just really nice to talk to you.
It's a pleasure.
But it's great. Going back to Jock Stein, and one of the comments he came out with, a match without fans is nothing. And then looking at what we're living through at the moment, it's kind of a prescient kind of comment, isn't it? It's hugely. It's got huge resonance now, and it's poignant, really. And what's interesting is that, when I started the film, there was no idea this was going to come, and I have to go to some matches because of what I do with Forest, but it's not the same. And in fact, it sounds quite powerful. I hate it. And my CEO is brilliant, because I say I can't come to every game. I just find it too difficult. There's nothing about this that I find in any way is like the football that I know and love. And he goes, I understand it, and he finds it difficult as well. It's really interesting that how important they are. And Jock Stein said a wonderful thing, and he said, take an average game with a big crowd, it makes it a great game. But take a great crowd with great game, no crowd, and it's not a great game. And he's right. You need the sort of, and I think Forest are really interesting, because Forest have struggled without crowds. Forest have like 30,000 nearly every home game, but without crowds there, they lose that advantage at home. And they only won at home for the first time this week in about 4 months. So just goes to show how important crowds are, not just for for us, the fans, but for the teams as well. The players really miss it, and I hope that in the new year we can start getting some fans back. I've been disappointed personally that fans haven't been allowed to football games, because I felt that they were outside. The few trials they did were done brilliantly. The testing and everything else. That I thought there was an opportunity there to get football fans back into a stadium. My fervent hope, lads, is that they're back for the Euros next summer. It's really important for them. Yeah, it would be such a shame, wouldn't it? Right. Gutting if we're not there, because the Wales fans are the best in the world. I know it's a cliche to say, but they are the best in the world. I think they're a great bunch of fans, actually. They're really quite special. Talking about, I have a show called the Cardiff City Phone-In, which I don't know whether you've known it.
I've known it, yes. Have you heard of it, yes?
In other days, I might have invited you on, but in your current role, I'm not sure whether it's... I'm not sure whether you're right.
In the camp,
But the guy I co-present with normally, another guy Tony knows, a guy called Al Worth, a lovely guy, actually.
I know Al, he's a great lad.
He's an absolutely brilliant guy, Of course, you do know Al, of course you do, yes.
Al, well, he's a lovely fella.
And he just finds it so difficult to watch football at the moment. He just can't get it. It kills him watching this pretend, crowd and all the rest of it, So
it is. It's. I mean, I've actually gone to some games, and it's even more strange in the stadium than the TV. That's the only way I can describe it. It's just really odd. It's like watching reserve football. You hear the shouting. All it's very similar to that, but with more on it, because you're aware that if the matches are important. But it's a strange old experience, and what it's done is it's made hopefully people realise how important supporters are, and they shouldn't take that for granted. And I'm really pleased this week they've scrapped this £15 to watch a match thing. Looks like it's being got rid of, and I think that's only a good thing for football personally.
Yeah, definitely.
So we hope this thing is over at some point and fans are back in the ground. I just want to ask you one stupid question about that.
Yeah.
When you get the false crowd stuff on the TV, do they play it on the? They don't
on the stadiums, which I'm glad of, because I hate it on the TV. Okay. When there was a time when you had the option of just the silence on the TV. I always went for the silence. I don't like the crowds, because it's just, and also they just miss everything. It's always like a second or two out. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's going to be on the keyboard, isn't it?
Yeah. It's like
penalty.
Yeah, it's like the old satellite delay. Yeah. So that was a bit like. So it's not for me. The one thing about being there live is at least you don't have to listen to the false crowds. They don't have it at Forest. No.
However, I would say the false crowd on the City matches that I've heard has been quite good because you can hear some of the songs, and it seems
They do. They filter in some of the songs,
yeah.
don't they? Do you know?
Yeah.
Do they filter in like anti-Swansea songs, or is it just like neutral stuff? Is it like
Well, most of them are anti-Swansea, yeah.
I know I was going to say, so not many to pick from. I'll be there. That's about it, really. Anything they could sing that's not sort of connected in some way to being a bit edgy. Don't you think? The Cardiff, the greatest team in football. That one would be all right, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that would be all right. Some of them are okay. It actually reminded me of something when you're talking to you now about. For a while, I was the match day announcer at Nottingham. And Sam Hammam rang me one day, and I didn't know Sam Hammam that well. Obviously, he had my number, and he calls me up. He says, "Hey, Stevie, baby," because he called everybody baby, sort of thing.
Yeah.
How about when we? No, I'm not going to do the accent. How about when we have a corner, you go every time. No, Sam, I don't think that's going to work.
How do you tell somebody who owns a club? Oh God, I tell him this. It's not for me, pal.
I just have to say it's not very, very good idea, Sam. I'm not sure that's going to work,
Do you know, one of the first things when I went into Forest, and they were like, "What's the first thing you'd like to do?" Looking in charge of the media and comms, I was like, "We're going to get rid of goal celebration music." And they were like, "Oh, and I'm like, no, I hate goal celebration music." And I said, if you're a football fan, the most amazing thing is a goal, and how you said you don't need a song to cue that up. So anyway, we kept the email. You love this. We get rid of it. And we had a few emails complaining, people, "Oh, we want it back. We were strong." And I was like, no, forget it. And then we had this one email from this guy going, "Well, I've been going with my son, and now the Forest score with no music. I don't know what to do."
Oh, blimey.
We were like, come on. Do you know what I mean? So that's where you are, like, with things like that. Do you know what I mean? So,
well, what was the song then, Johnny, when they scored?
Oh, it was terrible. It was Chelsea Dagger by the Fratellis.
Fratellis, yeah.
Okay. The worst, sort of. I was like, no, Landfill Indie. They seem like a nice band, but not for me. Like, do you know what I mean? I was like, no, forget that. So they've got rid of celebration music. I know, yeah.
You did well there. It reminds me of 2003 when we won the playoff final, and the atmosphere in the ground was unbelievable. It was a terrible match, by the way. I'm sure you were there. It was an awful match, but we got the Andy Campbell goal and all that.
Oh, I was there.
And then we kind of won. You've done it, and then on comes "Rocking All Over the World" from Status Quo. Killed. Stoned down.
My mate saying to me, of all the songs and bands they could have picked to represent Cardiff City, Status Quo rocking all over the world. It must have been. I reckon it was a Jack in charge of it that day. He was going, "I know what to play."
It was almost as bad as the last match ever at Nottingham, which is another.
It was so obvious that they were going to lose, though, wasn't it? Wasn't it so obvious?
Horrific.
You're like, of course, that's what Cardiff City do. They're going to lose the last.
Exactly. It was so Cardiff City, wasn't it?
It was, wasn't it?
I was crying for all the wrong reasons,
Yeah. Do you remember the playoffs? I remember the playoffs Stoke, where we went up in Stoke. I was there for that. Go back to Nottingham Park, and then Stoke get that goal, and Tony Pulis was the manager, and I was a bit like, mate, I went, we're out now. We're not going to come back from this. And then they scored another 2, I think. Do you know what I mean? And you just go, this is what Cardiff do. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I remember that one. Well, I was covering that game for club called Stoke City.
Oh,
sorry, yeah. I think I'm right. I did the Leeds match as well, the famous Leeds match. I did that for
Leeds.
Leeds.
That was the best atmosphere I've ever known in a game. That was amazing. It was ridiculous that night.
Yeah.
It was the height of the feral sort of Sami period, wasn't it?
Definitely. Yeah.
It's a famous quote, isn't it, from Leo Ferdinand about playing at Nottingham Park,
He said to me, "You're scared about going to Istanbul." I'm all right. I've played at Nottingham Park.
Exactly, yeah.
There's a great story of Robbie Fowler saying to Leggy. Leggy tells me, and he tucks in, and Leggy, he said, he's dragging me into the middle of the pitch. And he says, "Look at him." And he goes to me, and he had twitchy fingers. He turns to Leggy and says, "I'm not going out there." He said, "I'm too near the fans. This is Robbie Fowler." Do you know what I mean? And he's like, "It's too dangerous out there." So it was changing the way Leeds were playing, which just comes back to what we were saying about how important the crowd can be.
There's loads of other stories there about Robbie Fowler, his time at Cardiff City and all the rest. We'll leave that for another time.
That's another show in itself, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I've been thinking that. I mean, it's such a great interview. And we've spent most of it talking about football and music. So, we haven't mentioned beer and curry very much, but the rest of it's been bang on.
All my favorite things.
Just to close off, what's the future? I mean, everything's going so well for you at the moment, it seems, and obviously you and Vicky and you're getting all the jobs, and it's just looking really good. Have we got any?
Yeah,
other plans?
very, very lucky, you know, and I am saying that not in an all shucks way, but very lucky to get where, you know, I have, where I am. Vicky's the same. I'll carry on with the Talksport show and the column, and then in the new year, look at you know, what's next. I've been again lucky to have some offers. You know, I do seem to be, you know, be somebody for football films, especially in music, that people will come to and ask to work with, which is again is an amazing thing. Vicky's booked out really for 18 months. She's going to be doing another series of Alex Rider, and then she's on to a thing called Trigger Point for ITV. So she's solid as well. And in these times when it's so difficult for so many people, you've just got to be thankful, I mean, for having a bit of work coming in. Do you know what I mean? And you know, so difficult. My daughter's a great example. My daughter was on Radio 1 over Christmas. Katie, she was doing fantastic. She loves her music. She's like us. She was Madness's tour DJ for the summer, and it's all gone. It's all gone from her now. She was on the dole, and she got a job in a pub. Now the pubs are shut, so I'm very aware that it's tough for especially for the younger generation, in the sense, you know, especially from our world, which is football and music and that side of things. I just really hope it comes roaring back in the new year, you know, and everybody gets. I just think, and I hope that it'll be like a big party when everything comes back to normal and everybody's out with bells on, you know.
Yeah, and everyone maybe will be allowed to hug each other and shake hands and stuff, you know.
Have a cut, you know, where everybody's going to be missing a cut, you know.
Johnny, thanks ever so much. It's been absolutely brilliant. Good luck with everything. If we can ever do anything for you, give us a shout.
Well, I'd just like to say thanks again, guys, and thanks to you, Steve.
Thanks, Johnny.
Lovely to see you still on it, mate. Keep the faith, brother. Cheers, guys.
Cheers, Johnny.
Cheers.
Thanks a million. Brilliant stuff. Thank you, man. Look after yourself. Bye-bye.